Okay, welcome all to this fourth round of the Italian Youth Debate Championship. Today we will debate a prepared motion that is the following. Okay, this house would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. With the Infoslide, novel foods refers to foods introduced in Europe from May 15, 1997, whose marketing is currently regulated by the regulation of the European Union of 2015-2283. Today, this debate will be conducted by the following teams. From on-side proposition from Piemonte, we have Majo speaking corner, while for the opposition from Campania, we have the Mangino debaters. Now I ask the proposition speakers to introduce themselves.
I'm Elisabetta Karenchuk, first speaker and reply speech.
I'm Lucia Santoriello, second speaker.
Francesco Carciati, third speaker.
Okay, now I ask the same for the opposition team.
America Galante, and I'm the first opposite position speaker.
I'm Francesco Venosti, and I will be the second speaker for opposition, and I will be the one carrying out the reply.
I'm Gennaro Rupolo, and I'll be the third speaker.
Okay, this debate will be judged by me, that I'm the chair of this debate. I'm Benedetta Leone, and also by two other colleagues that I asked to introduce.
Hello, I'm Marta. I'm a judge panelist now.
Hi, my name is Carla, and I'm the same.
Okay, I think we are all ready to start the debate. So I give the floor to the first speaker of proposition team.
Okay, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Panel, our team is absolutely convinced that all foods already on the market should undergo the European safety assessment. And let's start explaining the stakeholders. So the two main stakeholders are the consumers of food products and the food market. So we live in a world where the quality of food is very different between countries and social groups, which means that not everyone has the right to a healthy food. In many places, especially in poor areas, the cheapest and easiest food to get is often highly processed, full of calories, sugar, salt, and unhealthy fats, but low in vitamins and nutrients. These foods fill your stomach, but they do not keep you healthy. Eating them regularly can lead to health problems like obesity, diabetes, heart problems, and other long-term illnesses, and we're going to demonstrate that later. This shows that unhealthy foods are widely available in the global market every day. For example, sugary drinks, pre-made frozen meals, and highly processed snacks. The lack of strict global food standards allows these bad quality foods to be produced and sold, and so many people end up buying them, which can have serious consequences for public health worldwide. But instead, we believe we should introduce global standards to protect all citizens because they would reduce diet-related illnesses, they would create a healthier society, and they would make a less burden on the healthcare system because they would no longer be a priority to cure these diseases. Let's talk instead about the food market. So the food market is largely controlled by multinational companies, which means that profit takes often priority over people's health. These companies do not produce or sell food based on its quality or nutritional value only to meet the demand of the mass market. So the focus is on creating large quantities that generate high profits and with low quality foods and scant foods. And with our proposed controls, any company that wants to sell food would be required to offer only high quality products which are tested and certified for safety, nutrition, and overall quality. This would shift the focus of the food market from profit to health, ensuring
POI.
consumers to have nutrition companies. Yes.
Aren't you aware that the EFSA assessments on on the novel foods and what you want to introduce them on the traditional foods, they do not block unhealthy foods. They do nothing about that. Do you recognize
Okay,
that?
thank you. Okay, thank you. No, that is not true because the EFSA assessment take away the foods that are disadvantaged at the nutritional level. So that is not correct. Let's move on. Over time, the impact is that over time, more healthy food options would appear on the market, and companies would be encouraged to develop new, healthier products to stay competitive on the market. Smaller producers who already prioritize quality and nutrition would have a better chance to compete with large corporations. Let's talk about how we can make this happen. So we will make all foods undergo these mandatory controls. It will be a gradual transitional process, which means that these controls would be done in different times we can slow down the speed at which the food reaches the market, but we do not stop the production or distribution. So this allows us to make new infrastructures and companies time to adapt to these delays. Who are responsible for these controls? The public healthcare agencies in each country, which already have expertise in public health, which would comply to the global standards of the UA. Then the controls would be based on scientific testing. So foods will be analyzed for their nutritional values and evaluated for potential health risk in short and long term to ensure they don't contribute to illnesses. No, thank you. Foods which will not pass the controls are foods that are disadvantaged nutritionally, or foods that are harmful for health. For example, frozen meals, snacks, and pre-made packed snacks and drinks. So our timeline is going to be: the first argument is that it safeguards the healthcare of society. The second argument is that it stimulates a fair and healthy market. The third argument is that it reduces inequalities caused by differences in food supply. Now I'm going to explain the first argument, safeguards the healthcare of society. Let's start talking about the scientific knowledge. So, as we said in our context, people in our society regularly buy and consume unhealthy and low-quality food because it's cheap and accessible. But let's analyze the disadvantages of these foods. Many of these are high sugar content foods, such as drinks, candy, and cereals, and they contain high amounts of added sugar. The impact of this is that they can cause spikes in blood glucose, leading to insulin resistance, and over time can develop into type 2 diabetes. Let's instead talk about foods which lack of dietary fiber, vitamins, and minerals. These foods disrupts gut microbiota, slows digestions, and increases the risk of constipation, obesity, and colon cancer. And we could keep going like this all day, talking about this food. And our evidence is a large study in the UK that found out that people who eat diets that eat ultra-processed food have up to a 79% higher risk of developing obesity compared with those who eat less highly processed food. From our font is Springer Nature. So, in conclusion, processed and low-quality foods are high in sugar, unhealthy fats, and salt, and eating them regularly can alter metabolism, increase inflammation, and damage organs. Second layer, we have more funds for research. So we believe that research is the most effective way to improve public health. Scientific studies allows us to understand the risks and long-term effects of different foods, giving the society the knowledge that we needed to make healthier choices. So research is the most efficient way also to prevent illnesses, because the more we know about the impact of certain foods on health, the better we can design policies, regulations, and dietary guidelines to protect people from before problems arise. Secondly, applying these controls will free up resources, money, and time for research for two main reasons. The first is that overall society health would improve. So there will be a reduction in the cure of illnesses like diabetes, obesity, and other diet-related diseases. Then the second reason is that the tests themselves are a form of scientific research because they examine nutritional values, potential cancer risk, or production processes. This means that while protecting the health, we are also investing in specialized professional studies that expand our knowledge. Therefore, we proudly sustain this motion because ensuring high-quality food protects people's health, reduces the number of diet-related diseases, and creates funding for scientific research to help prevent future illnesses and improve society overall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your speech. Okay, I think we can move with the first speaker of team opposition.
Yeah, just 1 second. That I'm organizing my ideas.
Okay.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges, dear opposite team, good evening. My name is Erika Galante and I'm honored to be the first opposite position speaker in this debate. As the first speaker of my team, I will present our main arguments and support them with clear examples and evidence. We will show that extensive research on non-novel foods will be redundant and wasteful. Financial disparity between companies won't make these regulations apply to the rest of the market fair, and it's explained by Francisco, and it will be worse for citizens, in particular for consumers, and it's also explained by Francisco. Before presenting my arguments, I would like to address some points that have emerged against the proposition. The proposition assumes that extending the European Novel Food Safety Assessment to all foods currently on the market would significantly increase consumer safety. However, this assumption ignores how the existing food safety framework already functions and underestimate the cost and negative consequences of such measures. Moreover, the first speaker said that EFSA don't analyze nutritional values because, as I remember, she said that it can cause health problems like obesity and moreover, while EFSA just analyzes nutritional values and allergens. Then foods already on the market have been consumed safely for decades or even safety. Then the producers always check what they are going on the market. So it's very, very safe what their job. Novel foods are as such mostly because they are aliments which were consumed in considerable amounts before 1997. Yes.
Are you aware that other foods that contains, for example, red forties are right now in the market and have been consumed for decades, but they are proven to be scientifically unhealthy for you and cause serious potential threats to your health?
Yes, always if there are foods that has always been eaten, then for decades there is already been a scientific proof that they are safe to eat. So this is my answer. Then novel foods, also it is easily understandable that extensive research to understand the underlying science behind this new food is needed to ensure safe consumption. More tests novel food go through is in addition to the standard test of non-novel foods are regarding allergens and possible toxicity, and also tests that guarantee the compliance of the possible new type of production line required for the new novel food. Also, the EFSA reports regarding to all types of edible insects, which are a prime example of novel foods. All products under this category have to go through nutrition, toxicology, chemistry, and microbiology tests. Now let's talk about non-novel foods. These are ingredients and aliments which have been analyzed and studied for decades, if not centuries, by our European scientists. If we were to apply a recommendation that will necessarily force all producers to provide extensive research on the toxicity, the allergenicity of a food, it will quickly prove redundant. Allergenicity, especially since all food sold in the European market gets tested for the 14 most common allergens, which covers more than 99% of the European affected by any allergy. For standard food, either this test will provide information we have already received from a operational test applied during production and distribution, or from a history of safe use. This history of safe use isn't to be mistaken with a general pardon for foods with long-lasting reputations. All foods are no, thank you. All foods as listed by the HACCP system, hazard analysis and critical control points, still go through operational testing. Just because vine has been consumed for millennia, it doesn't mean it can go directly to market. It still needs to be checked periodically during production and distribution. The only tests that this food will skip, thanks to its history, are the ones that will produce already known information, like temperature stability and allergens, as we have already said. One last part of the picture I would like to paint you is the expenditure issue. Thankfully, the European implemented novel foods regulation based on a fair economic model. The funds needed for the extra research are taken from the General European Reserve. If we were to apply such regulation to the rest of the food market, we would deploy significantly some very important funds, which without generating any breakthrough that's worthwhile. To prove how these regulations wouldn't effectively fix any of our current problems in food safety, we need to take a look at a very recent example. Northern European nations are known for consuming large amounts of fish products. Even though the control standards are very high, like the Norwegian government on food safety, there have been several outbreaks of salmonella. Even more than 200 cases in just a few days, and around a 33% hospitalization ratio. The food that instigated this emergency is a non-novel food, salmon. One could easily think that added toxicity and microbiology tests would have caught the bad batch. This, although, would have never been the case, as the fish got infected during transportation from Italy to Norway. Now, novel foods recommendation don't cover it in any way safer travel than what normal food laws already do. This surely proves that our current problems regarding food thank you. Problems regarding food safety in our continent do not stem from our incomplete knowledge of the food itself, like allergen, toxic cases, production line. As such, novel food regulation applied to the rest of the food market only prove useless and unhelpful to the European population. In conclusion, we have clearly shown that extending novel food regulation to the entire food market will not improve the life of the European citizen, nor it will meaningfully increase food safety. Instead, this policy will generate large amounts of redundant information data we already possess through decades of scientific research, operational testing, and a proven history of safe consumption. This does not address the real causes of food safety failures in Europe, which stem from issues such as poor handling, transportation, and distribution, not from a lack of scientific knowledge about traditional food. Moreover, by applying an extremely demanding regulatory framework to all foods, the European Union will be misallocating its resources. Public funds that could be invested in improving inspections, strengthening supply chain controls, or responding to actually food safety emergency would instead be spent retesting foods whose risks are already well understood. Finally, the consequences will fall directly on citizens. Therefore, this House should firmly reject the motion. That's the end of my speech.
Okay, thank you for your speech. Now we can hear the second speaker of team proposition.
Okay, I'm gonna start. Ho tolto il mio. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening. I'm Lucia Santoriello, the second speaker of the proposition team of this motion. I'm going to start with the rebuttal of what the first speaker of the opposition just said. Let's start with the concept of that they brought up of if something has always been eaten, then it's because it's safe. Just because something has been eaten for centuries doesn't mean it's safe. The already existing tests that you talked about are efficient in a way, but how would we discover a series of other problems that for centuries we didn't have the means to recognize, we couldn't recognize by only doing the already existing tests? Such as the discovery of the red 40, the colorant dye that is actually it is currently legal, for example, in the USA, and it's called transfer, and that's very important to analyze how with the tests that already existed, we weren't able to identify such problems.
POI.
No, thank you. And let's start also with talking about how you brought the motion only on the EU level. Well, we're talking about a global market. We're talking about not only the single fish that has been transported to Italy, to European countries, but we're talking about a global market, a global economy who is about making illegal unhealthy food for everyone, because it's important to prevent any kind of illnesses, any kind, yes, of allergies, but also finding things that may cause cancer, that may have a bad result on our health, and overall
POI.
no, thank you. And overall, it's important to consider that healthy food is a basic human right. So I'm now going to explain our second and third argument. Let's start with the second, which is that controlling foods like we do for novel foods would stimulate a fair and healthy market. Let's talk about today's market. It's a deeply unequal situation. On one side, we have multinational, bigger corporation who dominates with the shelves with ultra-processed food, with lower quality food, who can ignore laws of the status quo because they're rich, because they find regulatory loopholes, and they can escape this kind of assessment that we need to do. On the other side, we have small businesses who struggle to compete, small businesses in a difficult position because they are the ones who propose more innovative ways of producing food, more innovative food, and they're punished for being considered as they are being considered right now, so new and innovative. They have a slower access to the market, for example, because there's the monopoly of the bigger corporation. Our policy changes this by requiring all food to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel food. We create regulatory equality because we want a system of common rules to be shared at a global level, because again, we're talking about a global market. And what that means? That means is we would have the same rules for everyone, so the big corporation would lose their unfair advantage. For example, just because they are so big or they exist from centuries ago, there will be a fairer competition because smaller industries who invest in healthier food would be no longer considered strange because they're innovative, because they don't sell you the most eye-appealing things or the most unhealthy things just because it's cheaper. And the competition, most importantly, will be based on safety, nutritional values, and not branding and not price. Overall, this action we would do, this safety assessment, would encourage innovation on all the sectors of economy, because it would encourage innovation in bigger industries who would have to renovate themselves, and it would encourage the smaller already existing businesses who are already innovative, but they would be finally protected and finally pursued enough.
PI.
Yes.
Aren't you aware of the interferences by big companies on EFSA assessments now on novel foods? How do you believe that these interferences are not going to happen if we extend these regulations to all foods in the market?
Well, okay, thank you for your PI. Let's start with saying that on every aspect of the world, there's people who ignore laws, they ignore the status quo. Not for that reason, that doesn't mean that it's unnecessary to test those foods, because even if some, like they do now, they will do, they maybe do later, but why don't we add some new tests to ensure that the most of the corporation will be safer. Let's start with talking about the our third point now. That would be that introducing the safety assessment will reduce inequalities caused by differences in food supply. Food is not a luxury, should not be a luxury. It's not a lifestyle choice, but it's a basic necessity. Yet today, millions of people are forced to consume foods that actively harm them, or that doesn't give them the nutrition they need. Not because they chose to, but because it's way cheaper, it's more accessible, it's more aggressively promoted. Because if I can choose between vegetables and ultra-processed frozen meals, I would probably choose ultra-processed frozen meals, because they cost the same, but they're a lot more unhealthy. Well, they're more eye-appealing, so, for example, I would choose them. So we will live in a world where health is a privilege of the rich. By introducing the safety assessment, we would control our food. So we would set a quality standard for every corporation, and that would mean a higher quality food on the market. So the average quality of the food would, of course, increase, and low-income consumers would finally have access to safer options, because the public health would improve across the society. And we're not telling people what to eat, but we're making sure that whatever they eat will not systematically hurt them. And that would cause lower healthcare costs, a less burden, a minor burden on public health system, for example, and it would send finally the message that human lives matters more than a corporate convenience and the pursuit of profit, because that's what agencies and industries are doing now, just pursuing the profit. And that's why we're in favor of this motion, because it's with safeguarding health of society, it would stimulate a fair and a healthier market, and it would reduce inequalities caused by differences in food supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. I think we can go on with second opposition.
Yeah, if you just give me a minute, like to sum up my ideas, I have everything here. I will start, okay? Okay. Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Let food be your medicine, or medicine will be your food. Hi, I'm Francesco, and I will be the second speaker for opposition team. Now, before we move on, let me start by refuting some points of the opposing team. Well, first of all, let me clarify something about the general purpose of the EFSA assessments. Well, they have repeated many times in their argumentations without a clear mechanization that the EFSA assessments are ultimately going to tackle and block unhealthy foods. However, judges, please note that the purpose of the EFSA assessments is not to block unhealthy foods. As a matter of fact, many foods that are currently undergoing EFSA style assessments can be considered unhealthy. However, they still are on the market and people still buy them even if they are subject to these EFSA style assessments. This is because the EFSA just gives us the nutritional values of that food. It gives us indications. It gives us evaluations. It tells us about allergens and other things like this. And we will note to you how it is useless to extend these regulations. No, thank you. It's useless to extend these regulations to traditional foods because of many other options. Now, before we move on, let me also say that we would rather debate on a European perspective, as we are telling about the older foods on the market to undergo the European safety assessments. And however, if you want, we can debate as you wish. However, let me start by going on. They said that it would create a better market because it would increase the initiatives of the small food producers to compete against the high firms. However, in the second argumentation, we're going to prove to you that these big companies will already have one more possibility to infiltrate in the system and create disparities. And no, well, as we have said, this does not block the unhealthy foods. So their argument does not stand. We have said many times, however, that the traditional foods are the ones that have also always undergone many types of assessments. And even nowadays, traditional foods still undergo other types of assessments, which would make the EFSA style assessments redundant because it will give us information that we already know about those foods and that in the end will just turn out to be a loss of money which goes away from the European consumers' pockets. Now, let me move on by the second argumentation. These assessments will create unfairness because of industry disparities. Now, as we all know, as we have said, EFSA style novel food assessments significantly increase production costs because these companies have to hire dossiers, they have to submit dossiers, run toxicological studies, they have to hire regulatory consultants, and these procedures are already widely criticized because they are long and expensive. Now, this would impact different companies in different ways. Well, first of all, we would have the small local food producers who would be negatively impacted because of their lack of workforce and resources. Now, their only option to stay afloat as local food producers is to increase the prices because, of course, the FSA style assessments comport many other costs. Now, the problem is that the increase in prices are going to hit the consumers. So consumers are inevitably going to buy less those products and the demand will be less than the offer. This means that in the end, these local food producers will have a crisis. Now, on the other hand, we have the large food producers. Not only are they not impacted there much by the FSA assessments, but also because they have a larger workforce, they have larger resources, but also, as has happened before, they may infiltrate within the EFSA assessors, creating unacceptable impartiality. Unfortunately, this is a sad truth because as the European Food Safety Union has said, that EFSA panels have about 46% of scientists which have a direct links to companies or financial conflicts of interest. Now, the other problem is that many times the European Union has said to the EFSA to better this and to remove the influence of the big companies, but nothing has been done since 2014. Now, also, many scientific opinions and researches from the EFSA assessments is industry submitted. This means that it's the industries themselves, the large companies, who do the assessments about their own food and submit them to the EFSA regulation. So needless to say, this is going to lead to turning a blind eye to many aspects, because of course the big companies are going to tend to close their eyes in front of maybe some nutritional indications that might be harmful to the Europeans, and they might turn a blind eye to serious risks because of interferences. Now, this in the best case scenario will just lead to greater disparities between large and small food producers, and it will only put thousands of small companies at risk. And in the worst case scenario, we might even actually have a product which is harmful because of negligence, because of interference between the companies. Yeah, I will accept it.
So, as we said in our plan, and as the status quo tells us, the tests and controls are not done by the industries. They are obviously done by the government, and they are like regulations.
I get your point. Yeah, I get your point. However, if you read EU Regulation 22083/2015, you will clearly see that there is the possibility for European food to be assessed by industries, so by thirds. These thirds, as I have said, they may have interferences. Of course, this is the worst case scenario, yet we have to take this into account because it is our value to prioritize the safety of millions of Europeans rather than put these in useless regulations to traditional foods. Now, third argument, it would be worse for the consumers. As we have said before, if the consumers see that their prices are going to be higher on the shelves of the supermarkets, of course, as we have said, their purchasing power would be diminished. So this means that many people that enjoyed eating traditional foods, the foods that Europeans enjoy the most, that is the traditional, the definition of traditional and conventional foods, is going to be diminished, because in the end they will have less possibility to buy the same amount of foods. Now, this has been said by the European Foundation of Sustainability and Innovation, which said that over $2 to $3 million increase is going to be faced by the companies because of the implementation of these regulations. And this would mean, as we have said, it will not be absorbed by the companies. It will pass on to the consumers. And the consumers will see an increase in their shopping cart of 10 to 12% the inflation. And this is worse than the records that we have seen during the Russo-Ukrainian crisis or during the COVID pandemic. Now, this leads to us saying that in the best case scenario, the European consumers are only going to have their purchasing power diminished. But in the worst case scenario, as we have said before, they might even be harmed because these EFSA regulations might be interfered by thirds and by big companies. Now, imagine you're a mother of a European family, and you see your value diminished. What would you say? Would you say that these EFSA assessments have indeed proven useful or useless in the end? Now, that is why I've never been so proud to oppose, because we stand for the well-being of both the consumers and of the companies. We are the ones throwing away barriers. We are the ones destroying barriers between the local food producers and the big companies. Now, that is why we stand for the wellness of the consumer, of the European consumer, and of the companies. And that is why I've never been so proud to oppose. Thank you all for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Francesco. Now it's time for the third speeches, starting from Team Proposition.
Okay, can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, if everyone is ready, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Dear panel, before getting into the rebuttal of everything that the side opposition has misunderstood during this world debate, I want to ask you a very important question. The question that you should have in your mind during this world debate and at the end when you are going to judge it. The criteria that you should have in your mind. In which world do you really want to live? In which world do you want to grow up your children, make your children grow up? A world in which only because something has already been as it is, we just keep it, or a world where there's actually progress, a world where we actually work together to build a more safety environment for everyone, for the people of each countries in the world, because let's remember, we are talking about the foods on the world global market, not only Europe, but the world global market. So we are also talking about places where the food standards are 100 times lower than the European standards, where there are absolutely no regulations. That's why it's so important to actually build together a world where there is one singular and unified law about how food should be. Now, before moving into the clash point of today's debate, I want to make a very important clarification. So what can you expect from my speech? First of all, I'm going to make a clarifications of a very big misunderstanding from side oppositions. Then I'm going to move on into the clash points of today's debate. And lastly, I will compare the outcomes and the impacts of the two sides. So let's get straight to important clarifications that we need to make right now. Panel, please note that we are talking about the safety assessments that would be mandated for novel foods. And I think that especially the second speaker of opposition might got a bit confused about this, because he started his speech talking about EFSA regulamentations. And here I'm literally gonna quote what he said. EFSA regulamentations only care about nutritional levels, thus won't solve any problems regarding food safety for consumers. Well, we can't be more agree with this. We absolutely agree with this, because we are talking about EFSA normal screens that are already in today's world mandated. Every country in the European Union has to mandate those safety assessments that are already now conducted by the EFSA. Safety assessments that only cares about nutritional levels. So, thus, safety assessments that can't tell you if a food is actually good for your health or not, if it actually causes cancers or not, if it actually causes hyperactive or not. So, safety assessments that are enough. Safety assessment, no, thank you, that are absolutely different for the safety assessments that are mandated for novel foods right now. Safety assessment for the novel foods, so the one that we want to implement, that includes toxicological screenings, microbiological lookout on the foods and how they interact with your body to see if they're actually safe. Those are the safety assessments that we want to introduce, because as the side opposition said itself, the current safety assessment only care about nutritional levels, and those are not enough. We have to make sure that every different food that are introduced in our diet is actually safe for us to eat and does not cause any conditions. So now that we made this very important clarification, and please keep in mind, we will switch to the clash point of today's debate. First clash point, the condition of the status quo. Now, panel, let's be crystal clear on this. Through the whole debate, the side opposition kept a curtain on their eyes, saying, yes, in the status quo, there are foods that have been already consumed for decades. They don't need ulterior screenings. They don't need ulterior safety assessments. They are already good to eat. Two things. There are two different layers on this. First of all, this is not absolutely true. And because we are talking about all the foods on the market right now, we can't only look on Europe. We also have to look, for example, at USA. In the USA, in the last 3 to 2 decades, so in the last 20 years, ultra-processed frozen meals have gaining much popularity than before. Those are not foods that have been consumed for decades. Those are not foods that have been consumed for centuries. Those are not foods that the human always consumes and that thus it has proven to be safe. Those are foods that, even with the current safety assessment mandated worldwide, are considered good to eat. But there are a lot of different researches, a lot of different scientists that links those ultra-processed frozen meals to colon cancer and hyperactivities. So to actually concerning problems for the citizens' health. Those foods actually damage your health and your child's health. It causes you cancer and it causes your child to grow up hyperactive in a wrong manner. So of course, those foods are still in today's world in the status quo that they are defending, and they're saying that it is so right. In the status quo, those foods that there are a lot of different studies that proves they are dangerous for the health, those are still sold in today's market. Same things for products containing red 40 or yellow 40. Just in a second. Extremely dangerous colorants that again causes you cancer, but under the those regulations that are implemented right now, they are considered safe to eat, even if there are a lot of studies that demonstrate that they are not. And in our world, with our regulations, those will be banned. I'll take an API now.
Okay, you have said that these EFSA assessments, as we have said, they only give indications. So why do you keep, in a fallacious way, saying that by imposing these assessments as your first argumentation, you're actually going to eliminate these unhealthy foods?
I understood your question. You don't understand the word and we are proposing to you today, and this comes very clearly in the single clash point that I'm gonna talk about in a second. I just have to make one last clarification on this clash point on the status quo. The second layer about the status quo and the foods that if they are being consumed for decades, they're safe to eat. Well, judges, this is wrong, absolutely. And we have plenty of examples that traditions in our world that have always been like that were proven to be dangerous. There are lots of segregation, for example. Segregation of races was a tradition for centuries. This doesn't mean that it is right, and we changed that. So it doesn't mean that something has been like that for centuries. It's not, it's good. We have to change. We are a progressive society that needs to change. So let's get on the second clash point. The outcome if we implement those safety assessment. And in this, I will respond to the POIs. Panel, if the, first of all, as I said already in the beginning, we are not talking only about nutritional levels, which is the status quo and which allows dangerous foods to be sold, but we are talking about toxicological and biological screenings that will tell you if this is actually safe to eat or not. And in our world, as we said in the beginning on the very first speech, if a company does not match those safety assessment, if the safety assessment organism tells you that it's not safe to eat, that product is going to be retired from the market. It cannot be sold. This is what the EU law that we need to implement says. And this is why we are actually creating a better environment. So lastly, what do you really want in today's world? Do you really want to follow the opposition narrative where we just keep everything as it is, or do you want to tag along with proposition and actually invest in the future and in a more advanced society that is better and healthier for everyone? Thank you very much. Please vote for a proposition.
Okay, thanks Francesco for your speech. And now with the last constructive speech of this debate from the opposition.
Okay, please just give me a second. Thanks. Okay, sorry about that. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is General Ruopolo, and I'm the third speaker of opposition team. Now, as by my role, I will start by doing some computation and presenting some of the clashes that I found throughout this debate. Although I believe there is a precision that we need to explicitly mention right now. You have mentioned multiple times as proposition team that they were talking about a global market, and indeed we should only focus on the EU. But instead we interpret the motion as talking about only the EU, since no foods are EU exclusive, and as such we believe that these regulations are made and could only be realistically applied to the global market. Even if we were to focus on the global market, we will only get worse results, as these regulations cannot be applied to food markets that aren't necessarily regulated by the context of the other European laws, since this one inserts itself in a system of legislations that works and is applied only in the EU, not in other, for example, in other states or China or any other nation you have mentioned. Now, The biggest clash I've found throughout this debate is the quality of food, especially unhealthy food, and the EFSA's role inside the quality and production of this food. In the proposition team said that EFSA regulations applied to the rest of the market will reduce inequalities between poorer and richest regions, as poorer regions apparently would only eat what would be ultra-processed foods because they would be technically cheaper. Oftentimes that's the case. But instead, as we have mentioned, our POI, the POI as shown in the, I believe, first speech, the EFSA doesn't indeed block foods that aren't healthy enough. Indeed, you have mentioned, your first speaker has mentioned many times that EFSA actually has standards for the quality of food that gets introduced, but indeed we did our research ourselves and we found out that this only applies when a food is substituted first. But also when a food is slightly better, it still can substitute another food inside the market. For example, let's say that we had a super unhealthy food, then the EFSA, in your idea, in your imagined idea, would be able to replace that food or block it entirely until there is a better version of it, which is slightly more healthy or with a comparable nutritional advantage. But instead, this isn't the case. Indeed, by the EFSA's regulations, it is mentioned multiple times that a food needs only to be 1% better in nutritional values. We could say maybe 10 to 15 grams of sodium less or a bit less fat to be qualified as a more nutritional advantageous food, and as such can enter the European market. Also, you mentioned Red 40. I believe in this case we're still talking about the global market, although again we said that we're talking about the European market. And Red 40, yes, please.
Please note that the motion states that novel foods safety assessment must be applied on all the foods currently on the market. It doesn't say EU market or regional market. It just says that those safety assessment and those screenings must be applied on all the foods. Thus, we must intend all the foods in every country and not just Europe.
Yes, thank you. We too read the motion. And again, as we'll repeat right now, indeed, we believe the motion clearly states that we're talking about a European market because these regulations are only applied currently in the European market. Of course, the FSA is an European agency. And if we were to apply, even if we were to apply this into a global market, let's say in the USA, we will only do even more damage as the FSA works within a context of European laws, European agencies, European collaboration that obviously is not global. We cannot expect to find the European Parliament, the European Senate, or the European people, the European state of mind in other countries. As such, the FSA is only currently applied in the EU and would only work in the EU. Again, we're saying it's only about novel foods. If we were to apply to every other nation, there is a different context, and we don't believe the EFSA can actually apply in a global market. As such, we believe that we need only to talk about the European market, where it can maybe even remotely be applied to some other foods, but certainly not all foods on the market. Said this, we also need to talk about time as a security. We mentioned multiple times that indeed older foods don't need the same regulation that novel foods have. Indeed, I would probably say older foods many times, but I mean I'm talking about conventional foods that aren't novel foods, basically. You have mentioned multiple times that time doesn't make a food safer, and I believe you had made an example with what was it, segregation? The segregation is an old thing, so it must be great. No, we're talking about a completely different thing. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not like security, time security and time in general gives a presidential pardon, let's say, to the food and it can enter the market immediately. Just because bread is thousands of years old, it doesn't mean that as soon as I produce a loaf of bread, I can put it in my local supermarket. No, that's no way how it works. All foods and novel foods focus on the HACCP, which is another agency in the EU, which applies the same laws of security in production, as such checks during production, bacterial levels, insect levels in industries, both to novel foods and conventional foods in the same exact way. Because we need to understand that the EFSA regulations, and this is a very important thing, do not necessarily make the food safer. Indeed, the only thing the EFSA regulations do, and that's why currently today they are only applied to novel foods, is they give knowledge to those to the people about what those novel foods are made of. indeed, if we were to apply these regulations, as we have said in our second argument, to the normal foods, to the conventional foods, it would only be redundant, because older foods already have all the research done about how they need to behave, temperatures they need to be conserved, stability, toxicity, allergenicity. We're not saying these tests are useless in per se, maybe applied to novel foods. We're saying that these tests are needed on novel foods because the EU has made a simple logic argument. If this is a new food that enters the market, we need to learn about how it works, about how it behaves, about how it's toxic, the ingredients of it, the allergens that could possibly be contained in it. And that's fair for a new food. But why would we apply this and make wasteful expenses towards the people in the Senate, and because these research are funded by the EU directly, so people's taxes? Why would this indeed be useful on normal foods if we already knew all the information? Because again, all foods today on the European market need to specify all allergens, need to specify all ingredients down to the milligram, need to specify if a food may have been at contact with another food, let's say almonds. So realistically, we can only say that these regulations are more than enough and completely useless on normal food. Also, we need to mention some other things. Indeed, you talked about small business and multinationals, how small businesses will succumb to the multinationals since they would have advantages. And that's exactly what we said. In our, I believe, second argument, we have talked about how smaller businesses wouldn't be able to support some extra tests, because it's true, if the EU was to take on toxicological and allergenic tests for the FSA regulations applied on all foods, of course the EU would pay for them. But again, the smaller companies, before sending their product, would have to do more tests, even a couple more, but that would be another expense that would then inevitably on the consumer. And that's of course not what we want to see anymore. Now, that was my end of the speech. Thank you all for listening to me.
Okay, thank you for your speech. Now we can start with reply speeches from opposition team.
Okay, if you just give me a second and I will start, just to sum up my ideas, okay. Okay, I will start my speech, sorry, in just a second. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges, we have finally reached the end of this debate, this very intriguing debate where our sides have clashed on many points. And in my opinion, I will highlight the main three of them that, in my opinion, make it clear which side has won this debate. In this case, the opposition side. Well, the first one is going to be the purpose of the EFSA. The second one is going to be the wellness of the market. And the third one is going to be the well-being of the consumers. Now, let's first start by the purpose of the EFSA. They have said many times, without a clear mechanization, that their model is going to block unhealthy foods, that they want to try to give the European consumers a better way of living with healthier foods. However, they tend to neglect that this is not the purpose, as we have said, of the EFSA regulations. We have tried to prove to you, have said to you many times extensively, that what the EFSA does is doing checkups and indications, and this does not entail that these products are actually going to be eliminated by the market. We have said that the European consumers, the global consumers, could always still buy these products, and they are saying that the foods are going to be healthier. However, we have proved to you that with these interferences from the bigger companies, these potential interferences, the products may actually turn to be more harmful in the worst case scenario. Now, they talk a lot about segregation, but what is the point of talking about segregation if you're clearly missing the point of these regulations? They're saying that these regulations must be applied globally. However, we have tried to explain to you that it is only applicable in the the EU, as the definition of novel foods, the European laws, and the other European institutions are what create the FSA assessments in the first place, and they are simply inapplicable on a global scale. Now, passing on to the second point of clash, the wellness of the market. They said that they wanted to tear down inequalities. However, we have proven to you that these EFSA assessments have the risk of only enhancing these disparities that already exist between companies. We have the small companies who would just have to increase their prices to stay afloat, and we have the bigger companies who in the end will have the better slice of the pie, because in the end they're the ones who may even have the possibility in the worst case scenario to bribe the EFSA assessment, and this is ultimately going to have a disruptive effect on millions of Europeans. And that is why we have this, as the opposition side strongly value the wellness of the individuals. They haven't responded to these claims. Now, they said that they want to save money by doing this. However, we have proved to you that expanding these regulations to traditional foods is only going to be a waste of money and resources. Now, the wellness of the consumers. Needless to say, judges, we have said that the consumers are not going to be impacted, if not negatively, because they would still have the possibility to buy these foods that are unhealthy, as they say, and they may find their prices even skyrocketed. Now, I want you to take the part of a European mother. First of all, let's think of you as in the world of the proposition side, a European mother that struggles to give enough food to its children because of their diminishment of the purchasing power. Now, put yourself into the socks of the managers who in the end, the small producers who will see their companies having problems because of these new regulations, and in the end just focus on a world where inequalities are still rampant. They may even be augmented, where people may risk to have less purchasing power, and that is why we do not want to risk such burdens. We value the wellness of the consumers and of the companies more than the world that the proposition side desires. It's not done in a negative way by the proposition side, but they clearly like to see the problems with their models. And this is why I've never been so proud to oppose. Let food be thy medicine, or medicine be thy food. That was the end of my speech, and I thank you all for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Francesco, for your speech. Now, the last speech of this debate from Team Proposition.
Okay, I will start my speech. Eating low-quality food, processed food, is like building a house on a weak foundation. It may stand for a while, but over time it cracks and appears and the structure falls. High-quality, well-tested food lays on strong foundation and long-term health. Dear judges, let me guide you through this debate for the last time and show us the team which clearly won our team. So, first of all, we're going to talk about the main clashes that appeared in this motion, and let's talk about efficiency of tests. So, first of all, it is not clear to us that if the other team knows what they're talking about, knows what these safety assessments are. Because, first of all, they said that these assessments are only nutritional values, and that is not true because that is the status quo, but the novel food safety assessments are also toxicology studies and biologic studies. Then they said that if these foods don't pass the controls, there will only be the people only will be informed of this, but there will be no change, and that is not correct. In the law, there is written that if the food is declared dangerous, that it will not be put on the market. Then they accused us of being corrupted because we can make a law and then put companies to rule it. It obviously doesn't make sense. We said that this would be governed by the local governments and controlled at a global level by the UN, which is inter partes, which is not part of any economic side, and would be will be equal to all countries. Obviously, then they said that in a global level it doesn't work because we can't put laws, we can force laws on other countries, which is correct, but we don't put laws, we only increment other efficient tests which already exist, but we put other efficient ways which need to fix our status quo. In fact, they live in a fantasy where healthy foods are on the market, only healthy foods are on the market, where if an unhealthy food or a dangerous food is produced, it will not be put because, as they said, the tests already done it, but in the problems we said in the examples we brought, for example, frozen meals, we can see that it's not correct. Then they talk about that something is if it's being consumed for ages, it can no longer be studied, and it's we are sure that is correct. That is not obviously right. We believe in a progressive society where we study things because society is always evolving, and moreover, if we have the knowledge that these foods are dangerous, why are we still buying it? Why are they still being commerced in the market? And also, last point, the market. They said that the small business would be a crisis and the big companies would not be affected because they are above law, as the other team thinks. That is obviously not true because it will be an equal market, because big companies will be forced to comply with these standards, and that will help also small business to be more participating in the competition. So we present our world is a healthy, fair, and informed world where everyone has access to safe, nutritious food. Market prioritize quality over profit and decisions to prevent illnesses and improve society. And this, dear judges, means a more egalitarian world where people are considered citizens and their rights are recognized to health, safety, and well-being, no matter where they live or their income. All of them are safe in a house with a strong foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisabetta, for this last speech, and thank you all for this debate. Now, as usual, we will meet maybe in, I don't know, not before 15-20 minutes, while me and the other two judges will fill in the ballots and then discuss a bit about the debate. So you can enjoy the rest or the talk between all of you, and we will see you in around 15-20 minutes.